Okay. Okay. Fresh set, good camera lighting. Hello, I'm Elle, and welcome to my ethical fashion YouTube channel. And welcome to Susty Talks, which is a sustainable fashion podcast that is all about exploring Susty change and also taking a look at intersectional solutions within the fashion industry. This podcast will be located on my YouTube channel for now because I've never done a podcast before. This is my first time doing long form videos. I've done 20-minute, 15-minute videos, but I haven't done an hour sit down video. I really got inspired to do this podcast because I'm genuinely tired of TikToks and Instagram posts that don't really get into the details of things in the fashion industry. It's very complex. It's very intricate. And I just really hope that this podcast allows us to explore things on a deeper level than otherwise possible. So hopefully you like 1 hour sit downs. I go on a lot of tangents, so there's going to be a bit of editing here and there just to get things down more concisely, to get to the point faster. The goal is for me to upload these podcasts once a month, and hopefully with time they just get better and better and better. I'm no expert whatsoever. I'm filming this in my living room. I've only ever studied sustainable fashion / ethical fashion informally. I have a fashion merchandising degree, but I've never really had any formal expertise, you can say, in fashion and sustainable fashion or ethical fashion, whatever you want to call sustainability alternatives in the fashion industry. But hopefully it can just be a space for us to learn together. I like to call it a sustainable fashion podcast for the girlies. I think that's going to be the tagline. But yeah, let's get into it. So this podcast, we're going to get into fast fashion and love and exploring whether it's a myth or it's actually our only truth. I've been thinking a lot about fast fashion, which I'm sure you're aware of. It's essentially a term that describes the fashion that we see in the malls or in normal retail stores. It's typically clothing that's made in sweatshops. It's made from cheap polyester or weird blends of man-made fabrics, and then they're released into our stores. We buy them for super cheap, and then we dispose of it after a couple weeks. And so fast fashion is essentially a very fast-paced method of production, consumption, and disposal. And there isn't a lot of alternatives. We don't see ethical solutions or sustainable solutions in the mall or in normal retail stores, which is a reason why fast fashion is so normal and so accepted. We don't even know that it's fast fashion until we become aware of it. And this lack of education about the issues in the fashion industry just keeps upholding fast fashion and allows us to just be complicit and perpetuating it. Every time we buy something from the mall, we're perpetuating fast fashion. But it's not entirely our fault. It's the fault of brands and also the fault of government for not ensuring that they're paying their garment workers a fair wage. They're not ensuring that clothing is not disposed of so easily into landfills. There is no accountability by the government to these brands, nor vice versa, in ensuring that there's a fair process of clothing. And so right now what we have is just an influx of trends and clothing just coming in all the time into these stores and into our hands and then into the landfill. And our earth is not doing that great. There's a climate crisis going on, and so fashion is such a key part in perpetuating the climate crisis, which essentially will not allow us to have a safe and dignified life in our future years and for our future generation. And so I've been thinking a lot about this lack of education, this lack of accountability, this lack of alternatives in the industry. And unless you've watched a documentary the True Cause, which I highly recommend, it's on YouTube, or if you haven't read something or you haven't talked about it with a family member or a friend, you may just be unaware of it. And I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to delve too much into the issues in the industry in this episode. I just really can't help but think how fast fashion is quote unquote normal fashion. And I wonder how we can change this to be something else, because as it stands, like, we've standardized these fashion systems for the masses, and we don't know any better but to like buy from these things unless we're told otherwise. And then I've been thinking a lot about love because of Valentine's Day. I think inherently the closer we get to that holiday, the more we think about relationships and desires and like who we have in our lives and stuff like that. And I've been thinking a lot about it and what it means, because love takes on so many different forms. It means so many different things for people. And I think it's also very symbolized in a lot of different ways. And within Valentine's, I noticed that it's very much philosophized and enlarged into something that's larger than life. And so I can't help to question too, like, what is the truth of love? Like, what is the root of it? Like, what is its essence? And I just can't help to like interconnect that both like Valentine's Day, love, and fashion are just all so hyper-focused on materialism. On Valentine's Day, we're just expected to give people gifts. And there may be like a restaurant vibe going on as well there. Like, you go out to eat, you spend quality time. But a lot of the times, to have a good Valentine's Day, you need to give the perfect gift, the best gift, the most lofty luxury gift ever. I just can't help wondering, like, why do we standardize love like that? Like, why do we have so much expectations and standards put in place for something that seems so huge and so vast? Love is vast. It's mysterious. It's one of the most beautiful and odd things that we have, and yet we try to summarize and standardize it, and it's not our fault necessarily. I think, again, it goes back to like brands and executives and the government who are just selling this idea to us of what's normal and what's expected, and we just follow it, because otherwise, like, what are we doing? Like, what's acceptable? Like, what's good for us to do? And I feel like a lot of times we're very much influenced to perpetuate the norm of what's acceptable because of external pressures, external media. Like, a lot of times we're following what celebrities are doing. We're following along to like mainstream magazines. Social media has a huge part in that. Like, if you didn't share your Valentine's Day on social media, did it really happen, sort of thing? And so I feel like underlying all of this is a sense of pressure that I really feel like we need to tap into to further understand how fast fashion and love has become what it is today. And I think this pressure is just like a grip on us. It's like a weight on our shoulders on how to show up in life. It's our socialization. It's our identity that's like basically at risk of falling apart if we don't follow these norms. But I can't help to think, like, what is actually normal? Like, why do we have to place so much validation and affirmation to external things, external expectations, external like standards of what things are in our everyday lives? Like, I often want to see people question more of the mainstream of understanding things on a deeper level, but there's so much more to that. If like we don't have anyone to radicalize us, or there's nothing to radicalize our normal everyday life, then how do we move out of fast fashion, and how do we move out of mainstream ideas of like love and expressions of it? And a lot of times I don't see people talk about this, but we need more alternatives in our face for more education to come about. And for example, what I'm talking about is like when you go to the mall, you don't see sustainable fashion brands there. You don't see any context of the supply chain. You don't understand that executives are only profiting from that, and garment workers are being exploited from your purchase. Like, there's nothing there. There's been like wheat pasting and like tagging of clothing as a form of activism, and that can be education. But other than that, like, there is no way for us to see the truth. And that's what has led me to be like, this is just a huge myth that makes us complicit. And it just makes me wonder, like, how can we make sustainable fashion be a more normal part of our lives? Like, how can we make ethics be a fundamental part of how we see things, because ethics already shapes our thoughts, it already shapes our actions, it shapes a lot of who we are, our identity, and yet it goes so subliminally unleft and unmarked. And all these logical arguments and all these reasonings we give to life just are being untouched. And so I'm like, how do we go deeper? How do we go beyond small talk? How do we go beyond the consumerism habits that we perpetuate and start to really move into a better world? But I am hopeful that once people like watch documentaries and read books, things can change. Like, that's where most radicalism happens, to start seeing, quote unquote, the truth of things. But it takes time. And I just want to say that when I used to be a fashion student, I studied fashion merchandising, and I was embarrassed to say that I was a fashion major, because typically in a normal day-to-day life, like, if you're studying fashion, that usually kind of implies that you're like girly and fashionable and like trendy, cute things. And that's what a lot of my other fellow classmates were like. They're very much just focused on aesthetics and like their vanity. And they were not like the smartest people. I can affirm that. But that's not enough to say that's worth a generalization for everyone. Like, there's beautiful, smart, caring people that studied fashion. But I was just always so embarrassed to say I studied fashion, because I just thought I came off as vain and self-centered and just like wasting my time, because other people were studying to be a doctor, to be a nurse, or to change the freaking world. And I was over here saying I was studying fashion. I was also upholding these like bad ideals about fashion that's just nothing really serious. It's just you go buy it and you don't think about it afterwards. Like, it's kind of a waste of time for a lot of people, I think, but it's a needed thing, and it's also a fun thing. Like, if you shop a lot, I think you find some like dopamine fun things in there. And I just think fashion also seems frivolous from the outside. Like, it seems like a waste of time, and it seems like you just care about being cool or trendy or being popular. And again, it's just about aesthetics, and it doesn't go any deeper about that. And to a certain extent, I do think that's valid. I still kind of think that way, but my feelings have changed since I've become more involved in like sustainable and ethical fashion activism, just because I think it really gets into the roots of our values, and it allows us to create more change for people and the planet. Honestly, if you had asked me when I was 18, like, do you think your major is important? I probably would have said no, but I was still studying it because I cared about it, because I liked it. And I would have agreed that to be a doctor, to be a lawyer is more important work than to be a fashion designer, to be a stylist. That saving lives and helping better the community was obviously a better thing than just like making things look cute. But ethical fashion has allowed me to do meaningful work in the fashion industry and move beyond this feeling of like I'm wasting my time, even though I love it. And I really hope ethical fashion becomes the norm of the fashion industry besides fast fashion, because ethical fashion talks about morality, which is deeply connected to ideas of how we treat others and how we treat the planet. And it calls for a deeper exploration of our ethics and of our values. And it forces us to see what we hold true in not only our heads, but our hearts. And just like be more conscientious of how we're showing up in our actions, and then reflecting on what they mean, and making sure that nothing is going to waste, and that we're not hurting anyone in our processes. And I really like, honestly, this exploration of philosophies and understanding like my own logical and illogical statements that I hold true, because it allows me to better show up for the social and environmental issues in the fashion industry that just seems so serious and like impossible to fix sometimes. And I don't have all the answers, honestly. Like, I'm still kind of new on this journey. Like, I've been studying sustainable fashion for years now. I think I started studying it when I was 18. I'm 26 now. So it's been about 8 years that I've been like casually Googling and studying and reading books on it. I think it just takes time and intention to keep fighting against the norms, against the fast fashion industry. And it's not just an individual pursuit either. It's like a collective pursuit on changing what we hold true and what are myths in our world. So it's going to take a collective amount of people to make the fashion industry go from fast fashion to ethical fashion. It's going to take a lot of us to change how it looks, how it feels. I'm really hopeful that the artisanal fashion movement can grow and thrive in our world someday. Artisan fashion is fashion that's made from artisans, also called artists, that are really skilled in a certain craft or skill, usually passed on from their ancestors. And so this ancestral skill is cultural work and markers of their lineage and markers of their culture, obviously. And it takes time to make artisanal fashion. It's not fast fashion whatsoever. It's like its exact opposite. It takes skills, it takes time, it takes intention, it takes community, it takes culture, all the things that, again, fast fashion is not. And it's made by real human experiences, real human emotions, real human intelligence. Like, every piece is usually so unique, so handcrafted, so beautiful. It's literally art pieces. And it's really revolutionized how I think about fashion, because in the past I didn't think fashion could be an art form. I thought to be a fashion designer, you were just making clothing, not making art. But the more I've connected to my Mexican ancestry, to my Mexican heritage and my Mexican ancestry, I've been exploring their embroidery skills, their memories, their stories, looming, weaving. All these different things take so much context, and it's not just sewing a piece of fabric together. It's literally part of their life, of their whole life story. And I really like the idea that I can be an artist as a fashion designer. That's my goal, to be a sole fashion designer and to make things really just for myself. And if anyone wants to buy the piece after I want to let it go, and then they're more than invited to buy it. But I'm not in any sort of way aiming to be a huge designer. I don't want to be in the New York Fashion Weeks. I don't want to be on Vogue. I want to do things in a very alternative, radical way. I want to stay small in the sense that I'm not creating a million pieces for a million people. Instead, I'm creating handcrafted, artisanal things that are connected to my culture. And I do it more so to unveil my inner thoughts, because art is also therapy. It's a way to express ourselves and explore our deeper truths that we're not always aware of or conscious of. And then they surface when you're doing these hand movements and rituals through these tools called a paintbrush, a sewing machine, and design. So artisanal fashion is therapy. It's our ancestral tools of reconnection to ourselves and to this wisdom that we hold true through legacies, but we've forgotten about it because of capitalism. It's just a whole thing. I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I really respect artisanal fashion. I really respect it. I think it's such a tool to be used for our own betterment and for the betterment of others. And when we support artisanal fashion communities, we allow them to continue their culture, to continue their lineage, to continue their skills. Because a lot of times those skills and all those beautiful art pieces are lost because they don't have work. If you don't give these people work for the things that they're skilled in, they're going to move on. They're going to work in a factory. They're going to migrate to a different country to find a better job. If you don't financially support these people for what they do, it's not going to be an economical choice for them to follow anymore. So they'll have to move on. They're just trying to survive just like us. And so, yeah, I highly recommend you supporting artisanal art pieces. Fashion is a boring word, I guess you can say, for what they do, but it is what it is. It's fashion. But I like to say it's art pieces, artisanal art pieces. and stray away from fast fashion in that way. But I don't want to encourage material solutions as well. Like, I think supporting artisanal communities is important. I think buying their art pieces is important. But I don't think the truth will be reached if, like, we just buy ourselves into solutions. And I don't think the truth of the fashion industry is, like, one thing. I think fast fashion will continue for various more years. I think artisanal fashion, if it emerges more strongly, will be part of that complexity. And I think other forms of sustainable fashion, like reusing our clothing and DIYing, will also be part of the norm of fashion. So I'm always questioning, like, what is it that's going to be the new normal if we push for that as well. But I really respect artisanal fashion just because it's decolonial nature as well. Like, a lot of these communities are often upholding a different indigenous way of life outside of colonial and capitalistic structures. And I think it really will prove to be a powerful example of where we can move into in the future, despite all the complexities of what the fashion industry should be and look like. Yeah, decolonial fashion is also very much needed in sight of Western fashion, which, again, is fast fashion. If you don't know, like, fast fashion is made by Western executives in boardrooms. Like, they're all wearing black suits, they're all white, and they're all rich, and they're telling us what should be what we accept in the world. And I'm not having it. Like, if you've watched the Barbie movie, I think I'm sure you remember the part where Barbie walks into a meeting and it's like all these men in black suits, and they're all white, and that's just like fast fashion. Like, these businessmen don't want anything to do with ethical fashion, because realistically, how will we, like, mass produce quote unquote good ethics and good values? How will we mass produce artisanal fashion if that's what ethics looks like in fashion? You know, like, I don't think fast fashion brands will want to slow down and take more of their time on things. I don't think they will want to push deadlines months further than what's needed. I don't think they will want intricate weaving and real life human stories in their brands. And I don't think they're going to take time to, like, hand dye their clothing, you know? If they're not even paying their garment workers a fair wage, and they don't even want to hold themselves accountable to what's happening in the supply chain, I'm really doubtful they will move to ethical fashion / artisanal things. And so I just kind of, like, feel like there needs to be a lot of collective demanding from us, the consumers, to get the brands to change. I feel like these fast fashion executives and their boardrooms have a lot of control over our lives. Like I was saying, they've just normalized so many different things of what we hold true of the fashion industry, and they do it for money. Like, they do it because they want to get rich, not because of anything else. I feel like it's the same thing for all the brands that are selling us stuff on Valentine's Day and in the name of love. Like, a lot of them just thrive on perpetuating this materialistic form of love, and it's tied up in ideas that it should be like flowers wrapped up in bows and chocolates and red and pink coquette vibes. Like, that is all beautiful. I'm not saying don't participate. I'm not saying I'm a hater of it. It's just that's how brands have materialized love, and it's in such a corporate capitalistic method that it just kind of disgusts me for some reason. And that's why I'm, like, here talking about and questioning why love and fast fashion seems to be the biggest myth we have because of how it's being played out, and also our only truth, because where is alternatives? Where are different ways of imagining life, you know? And I think a lot of us have commodified our own lives to fit into what everyone else is doing, to feel that love, to feel accepted. And so I just really would hope to have more authentic, like, real truths of not only fashion and love, but ourselves. Like, I really want to know, like, deeply, who are you outside of all these expectations and fears and just standardizations of, like, who we should be. But it does take awareness on a lot of different parts and a lot of different ways to get to that. Like, I think there needs to be a lot of self-work on our part to become the best version of ourselves, and that takes, like, meditation and therapy and reflection and doing what makes us happy for the best version of ourselves. But it also takes a lot of systemic change. We need brands to be telling us what they're actually doing in their supply chain. We need governments being accountable to us versus anything else to make sure that we are fully aware of what we're participating in. We're fully aware of the consequences of our actions. Like, we should know if our purchase went to support the exploitation of a garment worker. We should know if this led to violence and misery. And I think there's silence and this covering up of things isn't helping anyone besides big corporations. And I think it's just to fill their pocket, but that's just my perspective. But we can always try to watch more documentaries. We can try to sign up for more classes. The People's Forum has been a huge space for me to learn more about the history of why things are. And I'll link down below a book. I think it's called The Anti-Capitalistic Book of Fashion, if I remember correctly. It's like my Bible, but I have a really bad memory when I'm talking. I've been talking for like 30 minutes now, and my brain is just getting fuzzy on titles, but I'll link it down below. It's such a great book breaking down why fashion is the way it is and who constructed it and why it was constructed that way. And we can always spend more quality time with each other. We can do more meaningful work. We can go protest. We can find the intersectionalities of the issues within the fashion industry. There's actually this group in London that is participating in Palestine protests. I forget what they're called. I put a picture somewhere over here. But basically, they've connected the issues in the fashion industry with their solidarity with Palestine against Israel. And so the root of it is like there's colonial power and threads involved in a lot of what we're facing in our life. So I highly recommend you follow the Instagram page to read about that and how fashion and colonial Israel powers are not helping us. But yeah, I think experience also is needed. Like, unless you've felt the issues in a certain industry until you felt the problems in how we practice something, you then come to realize that there's a problem. I don't fully know how to solve the issues in the fashion industry because truly I'm more of an advocate than anything else. Like, I haven't ever met an exploited garment worker. I have never been to a sweatshop. I've never been to a third world country where their mainstream economy is reliant on the fast fashion industry. Like, I've read books about it, I've watched documentaries, but like I said, I've always been disconnected by it. I've had the privilege of being raised in the United States. I went to college and learned about it there, and it's been through a very academic and privileged perspective that I've learned to fight for sustainable fashion. But I don't have anyone in my life that has been personally impacted by the issues. My mom used to make dresses when I was younger, and I love to make clothing, but an activist is someone that's like fighting for issues that they're deeply impacted by, and I'm not that. So I also have to stay aware of my own privilege and my own complicit nature in the problems that are present in the commodification of love and also of the issues in the fashion industry. Individuals are only so much at fault as well, and I'm not making excuses whatsoever. I just think that I have a responsibility and we have a responsibility to know how we're philosophizing things and how we can grow more closer to the things that are negatively impacting others in our planet. And I feel like our senses is a huge tool for getting closer to what's important. I think we all have a sixth sense to things, and I don't really feel like we listen to them, because when you go to the store, do you not ask yourself, how is this so cheap? I think we've all asked ourselves this, like, how is clothing so cheap? But then we dismiss it after we buy it, and we're so happy with it, and we're like, oh, this was cheap. Like, we recognize the cheapness of what we're buying, but we don't really think about it more deeply. We don't listen to that gut feeling of like, there's something kind of off, or there's something kind of weird here. I kind of wish we had a mass awakening of some sort where we could just kind of unplug from the system and allow ourselves and everyone else to just become the best, most good versions of ourselves. I really want us to be the most authentic we can be, where we can really understand our values, where we consider what outcome will bring about the most good for ourselves and for others, where love is not a part of us and it doesn't really rely on external validation or materialism. Obviously, I'm not saying gifts are bad. I'm not saying that we're inherently bad because of where we're at right now. I just think we're very spoiled and very privileged and very lucky if we're in a Western society and are in a global North country. I think we are in a place to set ourselves up for more exploitation and commodification of others. And so I just really need us to wake up and be like, we can do something in the state of the world we're in. And for people that are like in the global South that may have less resources, less privileges, I feel like I should be bound to be responsible of doing what I can. And that doesn't mean I'm making the decisions on their behalf. I'm not telling them how to live or what's best for them. If I try to help, it's more so, what can I do in the face of these systemic issues to fight for solidarity and for everyone to have a dignified and safe life? And I wonder how we'll work together to create a new fashion frontier, a new way of life for all of us. And I think for me personally, I need to grow closer to my own Mexican culture. I need to grow closer to my unique individuality. I feel like I've been a people pleaser my whole life. I've listened to what other people want my whole life, especially white people. I've changed my voice because of that. I've changed my values to have friends. I have changed how I dress to be likable. And I wonder what trends will allow us to be the best versions of ourselves, if that is a thing. I don't think fast fashion is leaving anytime soon. So I wonder how it can play with the current systems that we have to change things faster or more efficiently versus just trying to say fast fashion is bad and let's just get rid of it. Like it's going to be a very complicated process. And so how do we work with what we have until we have something else entirely different? It reminds me of like almost planting a seed. Like to plant something takes intention, and then it takes space, and then it takes nurture and patience to see this new life, this new plant come alive. In the meantime, you have other things that are thriving. Fast fashion. And how will we transform fast fashion, this life, while we wait for another one to bloom? And that little gap of like waiting and working for things that you want is very nuanced. And I hope this podcast touches on those things, because I don't have all the answers. I feel like there's just going to be more grapplings. There's going to be more questions. There's going to be a lot of moral dilemmas on like what good fashion means, what ethical fashion means, like how do we get things to be quote unquote better, like what is the truth of the fashion industry and what should it be. It also touches on the idea of like what is actually goodness, like what is ethical and what is not ethical to do, like what is the best version of ourselves. And honestly, like what is the best, most powerful alternative to the fashion industry, and should we just focus on one thing to change things, or we should focus on a lot of different things? And I just think it's a good idea to sit down with all these ideas, all these questions. I know I will in this podcast, and I think it's just also a matter of moving forward in hope and love and our authenticity to grow closer to solutions and self-growth. So yeah, I think I'm just going to wrap it up right now before I go on a million other tangents. But let me know what you thought of this podcast. I certainly still think that fast fashion and love is a myth, and also a very big truth that we hold true. And maybe it's both, and maybe it's none. Either or, probably. So I want to know your thoughts. Ooh, I dropped my microphone. So I want to know what your thoughts are on this. And if you have any suggestions on future podcast episodes, please drop them down in the comment section. I'm really excited for this podcast to grow. Hopefully it will expand onto Spotify and Apple Music. For right now, though, you'll find me on YouTube. Let me know what you want to see, and have a good day wherever you are. Peace and love. Elle.